Usually when I pop open one of the games I intend to cover on this show that I have no nostalgia for, I find a sweet but difficult to consume treat that introduces me to a short-lived but colorful world of wild flavor. Kind of like peanut brittle. And much like peanut brittle, sometimes I peel back the lid of that can and I am surprised to find that it is instead full of snakes.
Oh, the snakes ate all the peanut brittle.
Snakes are cool and all, but holy crap, now I gotta deal with all these snakes. Today's subject is one of those games. In the year of my birth, 1985, developer Nihon Game Corporation, geez, this is a whole roller coaster in and of itself, founded in 1980 where they filed most of their trademarks under the Taiyo Corporation, they eventually became more well known as Culture Brain Incorporated, a name they adopted in 1987. And in 2016, they swapped out the Incorporated for XL, until most recently returning to Nihon Game in 2021. What a cul-de-sac. Anyway, 2 years before the groundbreaking original Street Fighter, we got Nihon's arcade title Shanghai Kid, which is not the game we're covering on this show because the roster doesn't have bios and fully 4 of them are just named Kung Fu. This was followed by NES title Flying Dragon The Secret Scroll, which we're also not covering today as it's mostly a side-scroller. This had 2 Japan-exclusive side-scroller sequels in Hiryū no Ken 2 Dragon no Tsubasa, or Flying Dragon 2, The Dragon's Wings, and Hiryū no Ken 3 Nin no Ryu Senshi, 5 Dragon Warriors if you habla inglés. Then we had a Game Boy title, Fighting Simulator 2-in-1 Flying Warriors, which did see a stateside release and did have a traditional fighting game ladder in addition to its side-scroller mode, but still has no character bios unless you count this bit from the manual. Next came Hiryū no Ken Special Fighting Wars, which was a fighting game and almost got a US release, but still has little character information and is entirely in Japanese, so we're still not talking about it other than to say that Bobby Howler and Hurricane Benny should have shown up in future releases. This brings us to Hiryū no Ken Special Golden Fighter, and its hyper version for the Super Famicom in 1992, also known as 1994's SNES game with a generic name, Ultimate Fighter. This is also not a game we're covering. This is what passes for bios. I can't work with this.
Well, some people use their imagination.
Imagination doesn't make YouTube videos, only cold hard facts. Our next games are still Japanese exclusives, but have an important distinction in that they use a super deformed art style. SD Hiryū no Ken 1, Gaiden, and 2 paved the way for the first and only PlayStation title Virtual Hiryū no Ken, which is another Japan exclusive we're not talking about. What we are discussing is the late 90s N64 release, Flying Dragon. I'm Eric J. Chucky, and welcome to Violent Profiles, where we discuss obscure fighting games and the rosters that define them. If you could kung fu that like button, I'd appreciate it. Subscribe if you want to see more of my videos in the future, and feel free to comment a rich history in a language I can't understand. I won't be able to respond, but the algorithm will love it. Much like many of the other games in the Hiryū no Ken series, the Natsume-published Flying Dragon has 2 modes, only both of them here are fighting game style. The SD Hiryū mode uses the super deformed art style, is slightly more simplistic, has items you can gain and equip, as well as RPG-like progression. Virtual Hiryū, on the other hand, is a more traditional fighting game that has, slightly more realistic graphics that portray the characters as adults. The plot seems to be a genuine martial arts tournament, the World Tournament of Contact Sports, and there aren't any special endings, so the characters are all about their provided backstories. I also need to preface that a lot of this info is being sourced from the Wikia, so if I'm wrong, it's because they're wrong. That being said, we've had enough preamble. Let's get into it. Ryuhi is our protagonist, dubbed the Holy Fist. He's the main character of the Hiryū no Ken games. Trained in Chinese Kung Fu by his adopted father, whose name is probably pronounced Juon, not Juan as my brain insists, his journey was kicked off when Juon was killed and 5 of the 6 secret scrolls were stolen. At Juon's dying instructions, Ryuhi takes the Shingon no Sho, or the Book of the Mind's Eye, to the Shorinji Fighting Temple where its master, Gengai, furthers his education in martial arts, that he may begin his quest for justice against the Tusk Soldiers, an organization opposed to the Shorinji Temple and the ones who perpetrated the crimes against Juon. Gengai is playable in the virtual mode, but genuinely there isn't much else to say about him. That's okay, he's a cool old kung fu sensei dude, it's a good trope. Ryuhi, who is sometimes called Rick in the Western releases, plays just fine, but I might as well mention here that there's a lot of similarity between the movesets of these characters. Fireballs, uppercut-style moves with fists and feet, multi-hit combo supers. Sometimes they're visually distinct or slightly more appropriate for the intended style, but they don't feel very different. There's nothing really wrong with simplified character moves, but a bit more variety would have helped these folks stand out for me. Ryuhi leads the heroic squad known as the Dragon Warriors, but those aspects of the plot are sort of underdeveloped in Flying Dragon. Another member of the Dragon Warriors is Hayato, considered to be Ryuhi's friendly rival, the Ken to his Ryu. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that Hayato is the Ryu to Ryuhi's Ken, since the purple-clad fighter is the calm one who mastered all types of Japanese martial arts. Actually, now that I think about it, would it be more accurate to say that Ken and Ryu are the Ryuhi and Hayato since the Shanghai Kid came out before Street Fighter? This is getting confusing. I feel like I'm time traveling. Only adding to the confusion, Hayato's fighting style is listed as Kobujutsu, which is generally considered to represent armed martial combat. For someone who's supposed to fight like every Ninja Turtle wrapped up in one, there sure are a lack of weapons at his disposal. Despite what you think, fellow kung fu practitioner Suzaku here is not your pal, though I do admire his fresh style. The manual says he was evil enough when he first walked the earth, but now he's clawed his way back from hell to take revenge on the Dragon Warriors, so he's double evil. Serving as the right-hand man of the game's antagonist Ryu Mao, Suzaku can be purged of his darkness by winning the tournament, and he seems to chill out and develop interest in fellow fighter Yuka. So I don't know, maybe he was our pal after all. In the virtual mode, there's a character named Red Falcon who looks an awful lot like Suzaku. It's said that he fights without scruples and practices Kenpo instead of Kung Fu, but there's obvious visual similarities between the two, and Red Falcon has no other equivalent in SD mode. Suzaku is also the Japanese name of the Chinese mythical figure, the Vermilion Bird, and what is a red falcon but a vermilion bird? Yuka is initially torn between Suzaku and Ryuhi, and I think it's interesting that she chooses the former after he becomes one of the good guys. Usually in media from this era, the cute girl picks the hero. It's also interesting that it's strongly hinted in one of the sequel games that Yuka and Suzaku are no longer a couple. That's another thing you don't often see, even when there are long-term storylines across fighting games. I'm here for it. Yuka hails from Japan, employs Aiki Jujutsu's alternating hard and soft techniques for her fighting style, and is considered a master of throws. Mai no Hana is a sumo wrestler character from other Hiryū no Ken games. He's not in this one. Instead, we have Robo no Hana. The Yokozuna of robot sumo constructed on the distant planet Dusokui, Robo no Hana is also visiting us from the Super Chinese game series, which US fans might know better as Kung Fu Heroes. He wants to stand out and be the hero of the universe. And he's got moxie, I like him. He's one of the fighters whose style genuinely feels unique, and something about his bright colors and rounder visuals pleases me. I can't think about former CIA Special Attack Force agent Weiler without thinking about those over-the-top commercials for fruity drink mix from the 90s. Yeah, those. I always thought they tasted like cheap-ass Kool-Aid, which is saying something because Kool-Aid isn't exactly known for its luxury status. They're still around today as a brand existing beneath a couple megacorps, and while looking into them, I stumbled across Weiler's Light TikTok Variety Pack, weirdly from Walmart instead of the usual Amazon. In case you're wondering, there's only one review at walmart.com for them at time of recording. It's a 1-star rating that reads, "These drinks are very chemically tasting. Made me wheezy. Low on flavor. Taste like gasoline. I feel a little lightheaded from taking a sip from all flavors. I don't not recommended." So of course I had to buy them. Banana was a little weak and had an odd yet subtle aftertaste, but otherwise reminded me mostly of the gross Michelle flavor you get from banana candy. Coconut was a little better, less aftertaste. Lime, on the other hand, was some kind of lime abomination. It had the aftertaste of super sweet lime candy, but the initial drink was like watered down skim milk holding up a sign that read sour. Mango is pretty good. The aftertaste isn't exceptional, but it's not horrifying either. I have this weird relationship with mango-flavored stuff. Sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it. I think it started in the 90s with the Jurassic Park Jawbreakers, Spitters variety. Of course, referencing the Dilophosaurus they made up for the movie and not anything else. I could have sworn my favorite flavor was mango, but then I had a mango and mango-flavored things and determined this was not it, Chief. I'm still not sure. It was either guava or papaya. I've tried both since. I'm pretty sure it was guava, but I don't know. These are the mysteries I'm forced to contend with. Weiler's Light TikTok Variety Pack has neither papaya nor guava. It does have peach ring, which was pretty good, but tasted less like the candy and more just like artificial peach flavor. Strange after how candy-like banana and lime were. Unicorn has become a popular flavor for children's snacks in recent years, and the Weiler's version in that vein tastes very sweet despite zero sugar. Maybe it was vanilla, maybe there were some berries in there. I'd say it was reminiscent of cotton candy if there weren't a separate cotton candy flavor. Speaking of, that tasted like cotton candy flavored medicine that they forgot to put the medicine in. Like, there's the cotton candy there, but there's also this big noticeable emptiness alongside it. Finally, there's Mermaid, which I assumed was just going to be a third cotton candy variety, but it was sort of tropical, kind of like a pina colada cupcake. I think it might have been my favorite of the bunch. Anyhow, Weiler the Flying Dragon character has a good look as a cool military guy and is a member of the Dragon Warriors, proficient in mixed martial arts and amateur wrestling, making him an expert at close quarters combat. Speaking of distinct looks and American wrestlers, Powers is already the NCW champion, but is looking to become the greatest wrestler in the world. What better way to prove himself than by winning the World Tournament of Contact Sports? I don't have a lot to say about Powers, except that I like the way he's biting Ultimate Warrior shtick a bit. And I wonder what NCW stands for. National Championship Wrestling? New California Wrestling? Nihon Culture Brain Wrestling? North Central Washington? Non-Copyright Warrior? It could be anything. let's finish our tour of Americans who use wrestling with Hiryū. Sometimes he's called Jimmy in the Western games. Feel free to vote on which of the names makes less sense in the comments. Nomenclature aside, this card-carrying member of the Dragon Warriors was born in Mexico and uses lucha libre to fight enemies while employing his gifts of ESP to hunt ghosts. The manual calls him a monk of the ghost hunter cult who is renowned for his kicks, which is something we're used to hearing from fighting games, but imagine you know this guy in real life. You're talking to a friend at a bar about him and you just say, "Oh man, Hiryū, he's a wild one. I mean, he's got ESP and is part of a cult that hunts ghosts, but most importantly, this dude can kick so good." Apparently, when he becomes an adult in virtual mode, he also becomes boring as hell. Time makes lame wads of us all. Another super Chinese guest character, Bokuchin, is said to appear like a doll brought to life. He moves with stiff, strange animations and has an extremely limited moveset. He wasn't fun to play, but I can't imagine a couple of tweens huddled around an N64 jump scaring each other with creepypasta-style horror stories about how Bokuchin will come out of your TV and kill you if you input an evil code. But his eyes gotta turn red first, and there has to be blood on the screen. That's the rule with video game creepypastas. Before we hit the final boss, let's cover the virtual mode exclusive starring with Min Min, one of the Dragon Warriors. Successor to her father's Kochouken, which I guess is a kind of Gundam, Min Min is another Chinese kung fu practitioner described as being elegant and female. Really though, she's treated as being on par with the others, likely because both of her parents are esteemed kung fu masters. Swedish Interpol agent Kate spent some time in America to learn our country's signature kickboxing style while serving in the Los Angeles Police Department. If the internet's opinion on our version of the sport is anything to go by, I'm sure she walked away disappointed. Ah well, I have no doubt she learned some valuable lessons from the late 90s LAPD. Victim of the Tusk Soldiers, Japanese native Raima's life was saved when he was made into a cyborg. Who made him into a cyborg? I don't know. The manual doesn't say. But he sure hates the Tusk Soldiers now, so he's vowed revenge and plans on taking them apart with ninjutsu. I'm not going to argue with a cool cyborg ninja being on the roster. He's even got a little vanish teleport thing. Very cool. Thanks for coming, Raima. Finally, we come to Ryū, also known as the Devil King and ruler of the underworld. He's the final boss for most who scale the tournament ladder, except when you unlock him and play as him, or rather his clone, for the unlockable Ryū faces the true villain, Shin Ryū. He's a fine villain. Very spooky. I wish I was able to source more information on this game. Even the Wikia is a little light. There's dialogue between the fighters, but it's so generic, it's hard to derive much characterization from it. The game has an upgrade/sequel that would have been DLC in the modern era, the Japan-exclusive SD Hiryū no Ken Densetsu. It's a fully SD version that acts as Flying Dragon's virtual mode, retelling the story of the second NES game. Most of the fighters return, the virtual mode exclusives getting SD versions, and even more super Chinese characters guest starring on the new roster. So I imagine that would probably reveal more about Ryū and his world, but like I said, there's no localized version of it, so some things will just have to remain a mystery. Like Mango. I was surprised by how much I preferred the super deformed presentation to the older characters. I've always been a bigger fan of adult Link compared to young Link or Toon Link in the Zelda games, for example. Maybe it's the passing similarity to Samurai Pizza Cats, or perhaps more likely fellow N64 game Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. The bright SD art style and its chunky polygons made me feel nostalgic for the weirdness of that title, which Flying Dragon also could have delivered a bit more of. The Hiryū no Ken series also had two more entries, 1999's SD Hiryū no Ken EX on the Game Boy Color, and the final 2000's Retsuden GB. Both, as you might expect at this point, were Japanese only, and I won't be covering them for all the reasons I've mentioned throughout this video. As far as this YouTube series goes, Flying Dragon is where Hiryū no Ken begins and ends. But for your purposes, all of these games were solid entries for the generations in which they were released, so if you think they look neat, go play them. Next time on Violent Profiles, That Is Not Dead Which Can Eternal Lie. What do I mean by that? Arika's fighting EX Lair. It was a bunch of original Street Fighter EX characters that they brought back on PS4. I'll just give you that teaser for free. If you want to see it now, enjoy the first time I talked about Arika's characters on one of the Season 0 episodes, or just want to support me and the channel to enable future seasons of this very program, head over to the Patreon and subscribe to the $5 tier. That buys your name a special spotlight among the high scores as you currently see them on screen. This is also an incredibly elite and prestigious group. Until next time, white out.